I come to the Spirit, the three in one. I come to the water, just as I am, oh God, make me new once again. I've traveled.
Well, good morning.
So far.
Welcome to Fridays with Francis, and thank you for taking some time to be a part of this. Don't forget to hit subscribe as we begin our time together today. Wanted to begin today by talking about an interesting book of the Bible. It's probably one that many of us fail to read very often. It's the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah is an interesting book because it comes at that period of time just following the exile. The Israelites have been released and they've gone back to the homeland. But Nehemiah was still back in Persia as a cupbearer for the king of Persia. And someone returned from the promised land, the homeland, with a report of how things were going back in Jerusalem. And not much was happening. The city was still in ruin. The temple had been destroyed, and none of it had been built back. And just hearing that kind of news grieved Nehemiah right to the core of his spirit. And finally, he managed to get permission to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the city. So as you read through the book of Nehemiah, you discover how all of that transpired, and also the great resistance that he encountered by some of the folks who were still there. The scriptures talk in terms of them working night and day. They had a tool of construction in one hand and a weapon in the other, because they had threats against them, and they were going to follow through and continue to build the city back. And finally, they get the city built, the walls built back, and they call the people together. And they instruct Ezra the high priest to take the book of the law of Moses and to read it. And as you look at that scripture, you'll find that around the 7th, 8th, 9th verses of Nehemiah. As they begin to read, you look at the description, and it sounds like they're describing many of our churches. There was a wooden platform that Ezra stood on, and it was above the people so he could look out over the crowd and read the scriptures. It was a powerful moment because they had lived so many years in a destitute situation. You know, they had been in Babylon for the Babylonian captivity, and they thought that they were without hope. The exile is one of the pivotal points of the Bible and the story of our faith. They had been led away to a strange place far removed from their promised land, believing that God was somehow limited geographically. And because they were in Babylon, they were out of range of God's influence or power. But of course, we, looking back, know how the story unfolded, and God called Cyrus, and he let the people free and sent them back to Jerusalem. And of course, there had to be those moments of hope when they were making their journey back to Jerusalem, believing that, boy, things are going to be like they used to be. But upon arriving in Jerusalem, they saw that things were far from what they used to be. There was ruins everywhere. The temple was gone. So many of the things that gave them an identity in that place were erased. And so they lived a period of time in depression and despair. But when Nehemiah came, he brought hope. They built the wall, and they celebrated the wall being built as if it were a parallel to the renewal of spiritual life among the people. And then in the 9th verse, I think it is, of chapter 8, the people have gathered, and they, if you think your preacher preaches a long time, Ezra read from the law of Moses for 6 hours, and the people stood the whole time. And when they heard the scriptures read, they were moved to tears. When's the last time you either read or heard the scriptures read and you were moved to tears? You were reminded that God is a God of love, and that God knows you by name. And no matter how desolate things might appear to be, God has never abandoned us. You know, I've got here my cell phone. If you were to look at it, you would say, "My goodness, Francis, how have you abused your cell phone so bad? The face is cracked. There's a couple of scratches all over it. It's time for me to replace it." But you know, in 1973, when the cell phone was invented, it really changed the world. Maybe not as much right at first, but boy, in these recent days, this cell phone is basically my office. I'm able to punch in a few numbers, and I can go somewhere on the internet and research something I need to know. And then at the end of the week, on Sunday, I get a message. Of course, it's the end of the week for the cell phone, but the beginning of the week for me. And there's a message that comes up and says, "Your screen time was X number of hours this past week. It was up or it was down." It gives me a report. And I was thinking the other day as I looked at my report on my cell phone, I wonder what would happen if some bright person could develop an app that would go right on the front of the Bible. And every week we'd get a message that would flash on the front of the Bible and says, "Your time in the Bible has been up or down, and it's totaled X number of hours." The scripture is very clear that God's people find strength and encouragement out of daily reading of the Bible. The scriptures are so important. And I hope that is a reality for you. I've been fascinated how one verse of scripture can be read many different times and mean something different each time. It has the ability of speaking to us at whatever place we are in life. If you're in a place of difficulty, if you're in a place of celebration, if you're in a place of indecision, the scriptures can speak to any of those kinds of situations. So my message for this Friday is, how much screen time have you had with the Bible? How much are you reading on a daily basis. When's the last time you opened the scriptures and began to read, and it was like meeting an old friend and being moved to tears? Well, I trust that you will have a great weekend, that you'll be blessed in many ways so that you may be a blessing to others. And until we come together again next week, go with God and go in peace.
I come to the Father, I come to the Son, I come to the Spirit, the three in one. I come to the water, just as I am, oh God, make me new once again. I've traveled so far from family and home, from the God who knows me as one of God's own. By baptism waters, I've stood before the Lord. Oh God, won't you cleanse me once more? I come to the Father, I come to the Son, I come to the Spirit, the three in one.